Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux, taking a look at the feature race at Santa Anita on Saturday. It's the $100,000 Possibly Perfect. We're going a mile and a quarter on the turf for fillies and mares. Let's take a look at this field. The three Linda's Gift gets a significant drop in class, Ashley, and her race before a very impressive graded stakes score. She's arguably the horse to beat.
I completely agree with that. I mean, based on her running style, she likes to be somewhat forward, if not on the lead. And the mile and a quarter did work for her two starts back. You talked about in her following start, fresh off the layoff. She had to race in the grade one gamely. Obviously, we know the winner on a set is just such a talented horse that, this is significant class relief for her. And I think the big thing is last time out was a mile and an eighth. I don't know if a mile and an eighth works well for her with wanting to be forward and needing those moderate fractions at times. And I think, anything from a mile and a quarter, even longer to a mile and a half has worked out very well for her in the past.
It's a very good point about her running style as we toss up the Timeform US pace projector. She does like to be close to the pace. Pace makes the race often in these longer distance turf races, especially with shorter fields, and Linda's Gift figures to be up and on the pace. You'll note the 6 Musical Rhapsody, who enters this race in excellent form, has the LP flag over her chicklet. That indicates that she has the fastest Timeform US late pace rating, and she's been so good right now, I would expect a strong kick.
I would expect the same. I mean, what we saw last time out on the Santa Barbara going longer at a mile and a half, she got up just in time. But I thought the upper two back at the mile and a quarter distance, she got the great trip in there. And, in terms of where she was, in terms of length off of it, she was a bit closer. And I think that's what she's going to need at the mile and a quarter distance. We kind of look at the pace projections here. Linda's Gift is going to be forward. That's her best chances. So I think with a horse like Musical Rhapsody, it's fine that she can close from off of it, but you don't want to be too far back.
I think it's a little questionable how much the 1 and the 2 are going to impact this pace of this race. Linda's Gift just looks to me superior from a speed edge, but we'll start things off with Pleasant Wave, and she really only has one race that makes her tough in here, and you have to go all the way back to the 2023 Providencia when she ran very well with a good trip after breaking from an inside post. She was wired last time out, but the mare that beat her is pretty good, came back to run third to Adair Manor in a grade 2 with a 92 buyer.
I have concerns with her. It looks like when you kind of look at her trajectory as a 4-year-old filly now, they've tried everything, right? They tried the downhill at 6.5. They went to a mile. They've gone to a mile and an eighth. Now they're going to stretch out once again. And based on the impact that she's had late, it's been next to nothing. So I have some concerns about her going a mile and a quarter. And I agree with what you said, Dan, about sort of the pace perspective with her. I don't know how close she is going to be. Obviously, she comes out of races that are at shorter distances and maybe the fractions were a bit sharper, but it's not like she's been really in touch with the field early on.
Turnerloose is the number 2, and as all of you know from watching a lot of these previews, she's one of my favorites. She's a graded stakes winner on dirt, graded placed on turf. But Ashley, how much money can I lose on her? She's making her third start off the layoff. Maybe you can make excuses. Dirt last time, layoff the time before, but I have to start making excuses going 3, 4, 5 back, and I just can't do it on Saturday.
Yeah, it's super tough. I mean, you can find glimpses of talent when you go back to the races, at Del Mar in the summer of 2023, and they're good performances, right? When she was a very game second behind Closing Remarks, who in the previous start was much better than her in that race. And I thought, that's when you start to make a case for her. But now, as you kind of go down the page, to me, I don't know what to make out of her. They've tried her on the dirt twice. They had that turf race off the layoff where I think she ran an okay fourth when it was all said and done, but that was at a mile, and a mile and a quarter is going to be different for her. And, I just don't know what to make out of her because her form is so muddied. And I guess if you want to try to make a case for her, it's really going to be price dependent. At least in this spot, she should be a good price.
She's obviously faced good competition, dropping out of graded stakes company. 2 starts back, the runner-up came back third in a grade 3, then won a stake-bred stakes race with an 82 buyer. Linda's Gift's the number 3. Let's watch her eye-opening effort 2 starts back. This is the Santa Ana going a mile and a quarter, and she utilized her tactical speed to sit just off the pace. I love this last eighth of a mile. She's absolutely sprinting home from this group.
And I love this performance for a couple of reasons. It was her third win in a row, but they tried her at a mile and 3/8, a mile and a half. They cut her back then to a mile and a quarter. And I think she had that fitness edge. We saw that in the stretch. As you mentioned, she kicks on clearly there. She's much the best. She did face some nice horses in there as well. Kinjani's had some hype behind her. So, I think when you look at that, if she can replicate that performance, she should be very tough in this field, just knowing that she's also going to have that pace edge over several in here that need to kind of close late. But, you look at her last effort, I don't think you can really knock it. It was going a mile and an eighth, probably shorter than she wants to be going. And we mentioned it kind of earlier. Who beat her? I mean, probably one of the best turf horses out there, especially in California right now. Anisette's form is just incredible.
Duveen is the number 4, and she's rock solid, especially at these longer distances. You can even make an argument she wants to go a little bit farther than this mile and a quarter. Here's her most recent start, the Santa Barbara. Now, she's also in against Musical Rhapsody, and they really throw it down for the final furlong. Duveen is game inside. Musical Rhapsody just gets her nose down on the wire first.
And that's my concern. I do think she wants to go longer than a mile and a quarter, Dan. And maybe she's the equivalent of Turnerloose in your book. I've been burned by her several times. And it's just that, you look at her trip. I liked that when we see the Santa Barbara, she's at least closer to it early on, but it's also because they were going longer. They're going a mile and a half. She had that good position where you go down the page. Some of her races, she's way too far back early on, and just other horses in there have had that better closing kick than she has. So I don't know what to do for her. I think if you like her in the spot, you have to use her underneath. For me, I find her kind of a little bit of a reach on the top spot, especially with her given track record over the Santa Anita turf course.
I think that the 5 Lakota Spirit's going to appreciate stretching out in distance. After racing in a couple of 1-mile graded stakes, she was in a key race last time out, the Royal Heroine. One of the horses she finished ahead of came back to win a stakes race, sprinting with an 89 Beyer speed figure. She's run pretty well going longer in the past, and she showed she could class up, at least in the graded stakes ranks, when she was second in the Frankel, a race where she was badly compromised by a slow pace.
I think that's sort of the thought process with her, is maybe she needs to go further than a mile. I agree with what you said. I think you go to the mile and an eighth race. She was the favorite, but second best in that race. And to follow that up, I know she was only 4th in the Astra going a mile and a half, but I think all in all, from looking at her previous races, she had to really stretch out. Where you look at the other fillies and mares in there, they had at least been comparable, whether it's a mile and a quarter or a mile and 3/8. For her, it was a big sort of test in multiple reasons. And I think when you look at it, it's not that bad of an effort. So I'm curious to see her go kind of more of a sweeter spot in terms of distance, a mile and a quarter. I think it might suit her well.
We saw Musical Rhapsody, the number 6, display true grit when beating Duveen by a nostril in the Santa Barbara going a mile and a half. But arguably this performance, an allowance race going a mile and a quarter, was even more visually impressive. And Mike Smith gave her a nice closer's trip, the old in-out. But once she's into the clear, she settles it pretty quickly.
Yeah, and looking at the replays here, this is a good one to pull out because it was at a mile and a quarter, right? We know last time out she went a mile and a half, but I thought this was a great trip. And yes, she was last early on, but we can kind of compare that to her more recent try. She at least was just a couple of lengths off the pace early on and was able to make that late run, and she ended up being much the best there. So, you look at her in her last out effort because she was in the stakes competition. She was able to run once again without Lasix. And to me, she's probably the other big horse in here, Linda's Gift or Musical Rhapsody. And the big thing that separates them is that running style.
I think that's a perfect point as we head to our top selection for the possibly perfect. I have a lot of respect for Musical Rhapsody. She's coming into this race sharp. I just think Linda's Gift is going to get the jump on her, and that might make all the difference.
Yeah, and I usually go with sort of those deep closers, but I feel like the issue with a mile and a quarter and a mile and a half is when you have a compact field like this, it really comes down to the pace and sort of the rider's race that they're going to form up front. So I agree with you completely. I think Linda's Gift has that edge for that reason. She likes to be forward, and we know she can go this trip and she can go further, but I think a mile and a quarter suits her perfectly.
Ashley's going 3-6-5-4. I'm going to try to split the 2 horses to beat with the 4 Duveen, who's just very, very consistent, usually shows up, but she just might want a little bit more ground. I'll go 3-4-6, and I got to throw Turnerloose in the possibly perfect. It's Saturday's feature at the Great Race Place. Best of luck.